Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I want to talk about gay men and how to recover from a breakup. Over my long 32 years career in being a gay men's specialist therapist, one of the most frequent reasons that guys reach out to me to schedule a session is because they're dealing with the emotionally awful aftermath of the breakup of a relationship. This kind of loss is especially painful in life. There are often feelings of shock, bewilderment, anger, frustration, and a deep sense of grief and loss. I help guys with this situation to heal and overcome with many approaches that seem to work well reliably, but they have to be customized to each person. Over my long career working with hundreds of gay men who have experienced the loss of a relationship, I've been able to observe what kinds of approaches help guys to recover from this painful process of a breakup best. And I've also observed how there can be maladaptive, self-sabotaging reactions to a breakup. So today, I'd like to share with you much of how that process works and offer some guidance on how you can take care of yourself in this situation. Maybe you've been in this situation before, and unfortunately, maybe you will be again. Let's hope not. And maybe if this doesn't apply to you, you have a friend who's going through this, and you can share this episode with them, and hopefully it'll make them feel better. So number one about the aftermath of a breakup is what I call take in the news. You know, in mindfulness meditation, we just take in the present without rushing to react to it or judge it or analyze it or change it. If you get the news of a breakup from someone by an in-person meeting, a phone call, a Zoom meeting, a text message, or a Post-it note, take it in and understand that the decision is very, very likely to be final. I have another episode about how to deal with possibly getting back together with an ex, and you can look that up in the episode list, and that's another whole topic. Short answer is that, getting back with an ex is rare in reconciliation, so usually the pain of a breakup is for good. The pain's not for good, but the breakup might be, and you move on, to other relationships. Number two is initiate your own emotional first aid. Do find a place to be alone for a little while to collect your thoughts. Breathe. Don't be reactionary or impulsive, especially with ideas to act out in anger or rage against your ex or yourself or someone else. Take the time to process the information enough that you engage in affect regulation, which is therapist talk for get yourself together, girl, of what you're feeling. Number three is understand possible psychological interpersonal dynamics. All these ideas are not in any particular order. They're just common things and considerations. But if you must, start analyzing about how or why this breakup has happened. There are a few common reasons behind someone breaking up with you, especially among gay men. So first could just be an anxious and avoidant attachment style. You hear a lot about attachment style, and me and a couple other colleagues think it's a bit over discussed. It's a bit of a fad right now. But attachment style and attachment theory is very, very helpful for understanding how people tick. And it's easy that a breakup can be driven by an anxious avoidant attachment style that probably carries that person through lots of interpersonal relationships. Guys who experience that, just consider the emotional proximity to someone of being in a relationship triggers what we call his fear of engulfment, or even a certain castration anxiety, that being in a relationship means a catastrophic loss of autonomy and feeling trapped with you or anyone, and that all of their autonomy and freedom is taken away. Now that's an exaggeration. It's really not, even though relationships take some sacrifice and some certainly compromise. But a lot of guys who are feeling that way kind of have an irrational fear of engulfment or losing their autonomy that's out of proportion to the reality of what living in a relationship means. It's irrational, but that doesn't stop it from happening sometimes. Actually, many or most fears that people can have are irrational compared to their actual risk. Another aspect could just be the classic fear of commitment, which is often an emotionally immature person who thinks that commitment is like a cage or a straitjacket instead of a wonderful opportunity to have something great. Sometimes it's a fear of abandonment. A part of them is so afraid of being emotionally abandoned, like maybe their parent or a former partner was, that they break up with you before you can break up with them, and you beat them to the punch. He could also have low self-esteem, where having a good relationship is something that he deep down feels he doesn't deserve in his self-image and self-concept, and must therefore flee the relationship so that he maintains the familiar but sad outlook that he's not good enough for the good things in life, like a good partner. So he sabotages it all just to stay congruent with his low self-concept. Another probably unconscious reason for breaking up could be that they are anxious about a previously undisclosed trauma, and they're not ready to make themselves emotionally available to another unless and until they have processed the trauma and come to some kind of healing or resolution. Another reason might be that the guy is not wanting to repeat his parents or even a past relationship dynamic. He's avoiding situations in a relationship that he doesn't like being controlled or being abused or being bored or being frustrated. Some guys break up because they are responding to a sense of exaggerated safety, where if they observe, such as their parents, who experienced domestic violence in the past, they see avoiding relationships as their only true way of keeping themselves safe. We might not ever know which of these reasons or another one is behind your ex's decision to break up with you, or maybe it's a combination of reasons, but these are the behaviors that would very likely prompt someone to flee the emotional anxiety they're experiencing by being in a relationship with you or possibly anyone. Or they could just not be attracted to you emotionally or socially or sexually. Now, that sounds superficial, but a lot of guys leave relationships because the sex just isn't doing it for them, and they're not getting any kind of help for that, like from a sex therapist. Hello. So this does not mean that you are unlovable or unattractive. It just means that you didn't meet his emotional or interpersonal and or sexual needs, and he needs and wants someone else in life to try and do that. Breakups can also involve psychological or psychiatric disability. Those on the autism spectrum can certainly have difficulty with interpersonal relationships, and they might break them off prematurely if they get overwhelmed coping with them. People with narcissistic personality disorder might not be able to humble themselves enough to tolerate the give and take that relationships require, or they think that they're too good to compromise, or that they can always find somebody better in their eyes. People who are too clinically depressed to tolerate a relationship might break up in the context of other kinds of social withdrawal, where social withdrawal is a symptom of depression. People with the antisocial personality disorder might not be capable of the empathy that relationships take. People with ADD might be too distracted to settle down. People with OCD might flee a relationship before their partner finds out about their symptoms that they can't hide forever, especially if they live together, and they leave before facing that kind of perceived shame of being exposed about their symptoms. We might not ever know about these for sure, but when we're trying to process and make sense of why the breakup happened, all of these scenarios could be contributing to their decision. Another one psychologically could be the avoidant personality disorder. That's a personality disorder diagnosis. Or the schizoid personality disorder, when people have a habitual avoidance of relationships before they get uncomfortably close. So there's that psychological and psychiatric aspect to fleeing a relationship too. Even somewhat superficial ones, like he thought the sex was boring with you, or that you're not ambitious enough. I've seen that a couple of times, where you don't live up to his standards, that he's a wealthy entrepreneur and you're just an elementary school teacher. Oh, and that's not ambitious enough. It's kind of a superficial reason. Or you're not successful enough, where AKA, successful is a euphemism for just plain rich. As maddeningly superficial as these reasons can sound, they certainly happen. So, possibly more frequently than even the other ones we've considered. So sometimes it's for a really serious reason that's possibly understandable, and sometimes it's really superficial, and maybe the relationship should end under those circumstances. So number 4 is beware of making what I call and therefore permanent changes to your self-schema, your beliefs about the list of beliefs about yourself. One thing definitely not to do is to make new rules for yourself that are a permanent burden or self-sabotage based on this one relationship experience. Don't say, oh, I'm going to go back to women. Maybe I'm bisexual, unless you truly are bisexual. Don't declare yourself unlovable and withdraw from dating altogether. Oh, no one wants me. No one ever will want me. Don't take an outlook that, men are pigs, and adopt a cynical, defeated outlook. Aaron Beck, the psychologist who founded cognitive behavioral therapy, said that depression comes when we have consistent and unrelenting negative thoughts about ourselves, the world around us, or our future. He called that the negative cognitive triad. And if you allow negative thoughts in the aftermath of a breakup to change your self-concept for the worse, or make you cynical about the state of the world, or declare for yourself an inevitable grim future as a result of this experience, you could be risking a depression that goes beyond the normal grief and loss period after a breakup, and the depression might be more pervasive, what we call depressogenic situations. The very hard negative feelings in the aftermath of a breakup are thankfully inherently temporary. As painful as it might be right now, it gets better. You will heal. You will not be as upset about this breakup exactly 3.5 years from now as you are now. It's the nature of these feelings to heal and subside, but just not right now. It just takes patience. So number 5 is understanding the Kubler-Ross stages. Now, consistently in my practice, whether it's a breakup or another form of bereavement or grief or loss, I see evidence observing of the 5 stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the author and theorist, coined. You might know them already: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So while any theory can be pilloried for academic discourse, including this one, I've found it useful to think in this way, because Kubler-Ross was not making up a theory and then making people fit into it. She was observing how people were feeling and acting, and then created the structure based on her observations. So most guys facing a breakup go through these very predictable stages, although they're usually not linear in sequence, but they're alternating. One day you feel one, the other day you feel another, or you can feel both things within the same day even, or in the same afternoon. And if you know to expect them, it can take the sting out of them. If you kind of normalize them, that people going through a breakup might have variations on these 5 stages. Denial is a psychological defense mechanism that puts distance between you and the bad news. It anesthetizes feelings long enough for you to function, putting the event out of your mind so that you avoid being overwhelmed or rendering you unable to socially function. Think of somebody who's lost a loved one, but they're still coordinating the funeral. They have their grief, but they also might have to deal with the administrative aspects of a funeral or a memorial and burial service. and dealing with, a horde of family and friends who are maybe visiting from out of town for a funeral. They have to play host or hostess to that kind of thing, which requires a certain amount of denial of the overwhelm of their feelings. But the reality is that it did happen, and denial is considered a primitive and not very useful, ultimately temporary response. Anger is certainly common because you might be experiencing the abandonment rage. How dare he break up with me? Doesn't he know who I am? What kind of idiot leaves me high and dry like this? But the fact is, people each have the right to enter or exit a relationship at any time. You're not entitled to his undying love unless he is a willing and committed partner, and he's made that commitment. But there's no law that says he has to be, although grounds for a legal divorce to be granted by the courts used to require a damn good reason for it, and they still do in some places. Bargaining is a common defense mechanism because we try to enter negotiations with the breakup news. Oh, maybe this isn't a breakup, it's just a temporary separation. We'll be fine soon. Oh, maybe he was being hasty and maybe he'll come back. Your arguments with the situation are not likely to succeed, and we have to accept the sometimes humiliating and helpless situation that is, especially if we are high-functioning people who are not really used to not having our way a lot, and we're not used to feeling helpless. Depression is the other side of anger, where there's the abandonment depression of, oh, I guess he left because I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve a guy that good, so it's no wonder he left. A breakup can make you feel that the joy in everything in life is drained away, but that's an illusion. That's what I call looking at the world through gray-colored glasses, instead of looking at the world through rose-colored glasses. The things outside of your relationship that were good and fun and rewarding and valuable still hold, even after the breakup. Acceptance is often the last stage, or perhaps an intermittent one, where the intensity of the grief and other feelings subside. And we get kind of glimpses of the feeling of acceptance and making peace with the situation that the breakup has happened and life goes on. But we don't want to rush ourselves to a premature or superficial acceptance, because acceptance really comes only after we've processed all the other feelings about the situation and we've had a certain amount of time to heal, which varies person to person. Number 6 is try thinking and speaking and writing. So to discharge strong feelings that you have, especially strong negative feelings, we all need modes of expression. Thinking might include doing mindfulness meditation or reflecting. We might reflect on what we will miss about the relationship and also actually what we won't miss. No one is perfect, and when the good stuff goes out the window, the bad stuff does too. But thinking is not always our friend. It's important to recognize and avoid when you are perseverating or ruminating or brooding on what's happened. If you find yourself doing that, move your body, get active, get out of your own head, and realize there is more to your life than him. There always is, even in the best of relationships, which is something people forget sometimes when they're in relationships. Speaking is an expression that can help, hello, talk therapy, to support a family or friends, and of course a therapist or a coach. Writing about your experience can be a catharsis, getting your feelings up and out from your gut, releasing them from holding on to them, and discharging traumatic thoughts through journaling or any of what we call the expressive therapies that I used to teach at USC. It can be prose, poetry, art, music, sculpture, but in music, especially listening or writing song lyrics that validate what you're feeling. Taylor Swift has made an art form out of processing her feelings about relationships into her songs. So lyrics can give you an imagery that speak to raw emotion more than just words or statements. Cher's song from the movie Burlesque, You Haven't Seen the Last of Me, that was written by Diane Warren, an award-winning songwriter, is one of my favorites. Look that up on YouTube and Cher, You Haven't Seen the Last of Me. And it's a great song for feeling uplifted when you're feeling down. You haven't seen the last of me. This is far from over. Number 7 is identify your support system of personal and professional figures. Kind of like I just said. No one can or should face a breakup alone. Sure, it was your relationship loss, but as the saying goes, company doubles our joys and divides our sorrows. Social workers like me emphasize that for whatever challenges we have in life, we activate our social support system. I see these as 2 concentric circles around you. There's the professional ring, such as your therapist, maybe a medical provider who prescribes you something like a sleep aid for the short term, or a hairstylist who makes you feel good about yourself by giving you a good haircut. Then there's the personal ring, the cadre of people whom you rely on to provide emotional support, which can be relatives, friends, coworkers, neighbors. This is why it's important not to neglect your friends when you get a boyfriend, because you might need those friends again if the relationship ends. And plus, it's healthy just to have friends in addition to having a spouse or a partner. Number 8 is go to the gym. Cliche as that might sound, getting out of your head and getting moving with your body can be an enormous help in healing. Physical movement helps regulate our heart functioning and lung functioning and blood pressure and hormones and sleep quality and blood circulation and metabolism. And when these vital life processes of your body are at their best, they can help with our emotional and psychological well-being too. Number 9 is engage with the gay men's community. Guys who have experienced a breakup are at a terrible risk for their vulnerability to internalize homophobia to spike. Because this gay relationship or this gay man caused you grief does not and should not extrapolate to the entire gay men's community. If you had a bad gay experience, you need to re-engage in the gay men's community in good and rewarding ways. Join something gay-related in meetup.com, such as a board games night or a book club or a hiking group. Volunteer for an LGBT advocacy organization. Mentor or support a fellow gay male peer in the community, especially someone extra vulnerable or from a disenfranchised group, like gay men with disabilities. Expose yourself to good experiences that challenge this idea that all gay men are rubbish because one of them happened to treat you very badly. Number 10 is divide up the friends, his, yours, and the shared ones. Be prepared for your interpersonal and social relationships to change outside of your relationship with your ex. Who gets the friends in the divorce? Which people you used to know you might not see much of because they're his friends. Which friends are really yours historically that you can lean on and rely on for peer social support? Which friends did you and your ex share that you can continue to share as long as neither one of you are pressuring those friends to take sides? Number 11 is bring critical thinking to social media. So more recently in history, breakups have had a close relationship to social media. Changing your status from in a relationship to it's complicated or to single can be a social media rite of passage. Avoid the impulse to block your ex on every platform to try and punish him with isolation away from you. If he just broke up with you, he's probably not going to be obsessed with your social media. If he wanted photos of you, he could have kept you in person. So be resistant to the impulse to trash him in retaliation, even subtly, in posts or comments. Most guys are not being subtle as they think about this. People know that vague negative status statements like beware, gaslighting is real, they know that's probably about your ex. So also in an emotionally vulnerable state for any reason, beware of additional unnecessary exposure to bad news and stress from the media or from social media. Remember, that's how the media makes money. You know, the old saying about newspapers, if it bleeds, it leads on the front page. As much as you might want to be, a responsible, informed civic member of society, and that's great, up to and including activism, I think, particularly on LGBT issues, the news can wait until you've established a critical mass of emotional first aid for yourself. You sometimes have to look out for number one when you're in a crisis like a breakup. Number 12, bring it all to therapy. Like I said, a breakup is one of the most frequent reasons I start to see new clients. And because this recovery is a difficult process, and bringing all your thoughts and feelings and reactions to a professional setting with someone who has helped guys just like you with this literally hundreds of times can help. I know where the landmines are buried, and I can give you a map to avoid them. I can also listen when you just need to be heard. I can also empathize when you just need to hurt. Therapy can be the place to take your feelings when you might overwhelm even your most understanding of friends just with the magnitude of what you're going through. They can only listen and empathize so much before they're like, okay, I'm done with this. They also don't know how to help or what to say as much. And that can also be true with coaching, just in a slightly different way. We're not treating the grief and loss so much clinically as much as coaching helps you to plan a strategy of moving on with your life. There's a lot of overlap between therapy and coaching, but they have some important differences because of how they're legally categorized. So number 13 is make time for me time. One challenge of being in a relationship is that you just can't think of yourself anymore. You have to have at least some accountability and even compromise or sacrifice in exchange for having someone who would jump on a grenade for you. It's a bargain at twice the price. However, after a breakup, you get to indulge yourself. It's not about the we anymore. It reverts back to the I. And you don't have to make compromises or consider a partner's feelings or check in if you're going to run late or something like that. You can do whatever you want, and that can feel luxuriously self-indulgent and liberating. Number 14 is negotiate the post-relationship relationship. If you do have continued contact with your ex because you share friends or you share owning property together, or you co-parent children, or you have joint custody of a pet, you have to negotiate the post-relationship relationship that you have with this person. Who are they to you existentially? And that changes from partner or spouse to ex, and if you're really lucky, to friend. But even friends have boundaries and expectations and parameters of the friendship, and there's no obligation to be friends with an ex if you wouldn't be friends with them otherwise. If there's something about their character that rubs you the wrong way, or you've been treated badly, you wouldn't want a friend who treats you like that either. So some guys don't want to be friends with an ex because it's too emotionally painful or sexually frustrating or impractical, because you don't need more friends when you don't have time enough to see the friends you already have. Don't agree to anything that doesn't feel right for you. It's okay for your ex to just be a stranger or just somebody that you used to know. But you also don't have to badmouth him and perform voodoo curse rituals either. Some guys make lousy boyfriends, but excellent friends in the platonic sense. Let yourself have the post-relationship relationship that both of you collaborate to create together. And if others don't understand, it's none of their business. If a new boyfriend comes your way, you might just have to discuss that you have a close friend who used to be an ex, but he's not a threat, and explain why he makes a good friend, but he didn't make a good boyfriend, and no, you're not going back to him, and no, he doesn't have to be jealous or worried. Number 15 is prepare what to say if you see him out. Bars, clubs, gay events, all that. Most guys after breakups dread running into their ex within the local area, or especially gay men's environments, like a bar or a club or a fundraiser or a sex club or an orgy. Think about what you want to say, if anything, to an ex that you run into without planning or expecting to. Rehearse the phrase in your mind so you don't have to think about it. If you turn the corner at a house party and there he is, a simple smile and nod might suffice. Or a brief, oh, hi, John, nice to see you, while you keep moving. Or if you do have a brief conversation over the buffet table, stick to the kind of small talk you might say at the office holiday party. Nice to see you. Been good? What have you been up to? Oh, you've been to Paris. That sounds nice. Wow, hope it was fun. And disclose very judiciously. Don't confess new feelings or attempt to guilt him or punish him or seek revenge by gloating or bragging. Hey, you see that hot guy over there? He's a 22-year-old fitness model, and he's my date tonight. You don't need that. Or, we're going to Tulum together next week for 2 weeks. He sold his startup, and he's a millionaire now. Just, no, none of that. And if you really feel you must contact your ex to see him, to have some kind of a closure meeting, ask him. But be very, very clear on why you're wanting this. If it's for a benevolent closure before you can move on, making peace and saying a proper goodbye, fine. But if it's to challenge his decision or charm him or guilt him or seduce him into coming back to you, don't do it. Really, look at your motives for asking for a meeting. Many times your motives just aren't pure enough to request a closure meeting, except if you want to negotiate the post-relationship relationship, or if you have to discuss your lives that are entangled, especially financially or when the well-being of others is involved, like children or pets. Many times we just have to live with the fact that we might not ever fully understand why the breakup happened, just that it did happen, and however reason that was the cause of it, whatever, we still have to just move on. Number 16 is evaluate the relationship. When you're really ready, probably only after some time has passed and some therapy has passed, excuse me, if you're brave, you might want to reflect on and evaluate the relationship. Be very brave about your self-reflection and say, what can I learn from this? What would you have done differently, if anything? Remember, what might have made the previous relationship work better might not translate to your next relationship, because that will be with a new guy, with a new personality and background and culture and values. If your ex didn't like your dumb jokes, maybe the next guy will find them charming and fun and cute and amusing. What different behavior did you want of him in retrospect? Is any of that applicable to your next relationship or not? One of the most important reasons to reflect on your last relationship is not so much about the past as much as it is to get you primed and ready for the next relationship. Don't let a breakup undermine your ability to love or your ability to trust or your ability to invest, because that's too high a price to pay to protect yourself. But you want to kind of be at your best, and if you really have to own something, if something was really your fault that contributed to the breakup, like you have a drug or alcohol problem or something like that, then you just take responsibility for that and make those changes and make yourself a better boyfriend for the next guy. Number 17 is focus on a reinvention of the self. The time after a breakup is a time when I often see what I call in gay men the personal renaissance. Guys get a new look to their hair or their wardrobe, or they get promoted at work, or they redecorate or move their home. They relocate, they open their own business. After the initial grief has passed, it can be a time of liberation and blossoming and exciting change that might have been long overdue when you were in your relationship. Maybe your ex was somehow putting you under his thumb or holding you back, and now that that impediment is gone and you're free to go for it, it leaves you with a more clear perspective on yourself that helps you to be more authentic in your next relationship and maybe more emotionally available to them. Number 18 is remember to pamper yourself. If you go through the emotional difficulty of a breakup, you kind of have some self-pampering coming to you. Treat yourself, take a vacation, buy something fun, within reason. Don't create a debt problem. You have to balance the crappy parts of life with the fun parts, really throughout the lifespan, because life is made up of challenges and rewards that go on for a lifetime. Number 19 is beware of what I call the maladaptive coping strategies after a breakup. Resist the sometimes strong temptation when you're feeling bad in the aftermath of a breakup to just say fuck it and indulge in anesthetizing and self-medicating with excessive drinking or drugs or mechanical undesired sex, overwork, self-isolation, impulsive urges to flee, an urge for revenge, or what seems like a protective withdrawal and hibernating from the world to protect yourself. Listen to Jerry Herman's song from the Broadway show Hello, Dolly, called Before the Parade Passes By, which is about a widow, Dolly, deciding to re-enter life after the death of her husband. The late Jerry Herman was a gay, long-term HIV survivor. And number 20 is let yourself have sex and even date soon. There's that joke, the best way to get over somebody is to get under someone else. Remind yourself that you don't necessarily need to wait to date or have sex again. You're not the little Italian widow who's observing the proper mourning period. There is no required proper waiting period for this. It's up to you whenever you're ready. An episode of The Golden Girls featured a conversation among the ladies about how long they waited to date or have sex after their divorce in the case of Dorothy, or being widowed in the case of Blanche and Rose. And when Dorothy asked Blanche how long she waited, Sophia pipes up, "Till the paramedics came." So it's all up to you. Remember, your body is always yours to control, to have as much or as little sex as you feel is right for you in your sexual value system. Number 21 is utilize affirming music. I mentioned the Jerry Herman song Before the Parade Passes By, Cher, You Haven't Seen the Last of Me, and another Jerry Herman show tune, this time from his own favorite Broadway score, as legend goes, was actually a kind of a flop, called Mac and Mabel, about Mac Sennett, the silent film director, and Mabel Normand, the early silent film star, is a song called Time Heals Everything. It's kind of a sad song, but sometimes listening to those can validate your feelings and facilitate an emotional catharsis. Another one, This Nearly Was Mine, from South Pacific, is another one, Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein. Romantic Notions is a song from an early 80s obscure kind of musical, although it was on Broadway, called Romance, Romance. And that's another song that validates the fond wish for things to be different than they are. There's another episode where I discuss that because it was really a fun musical, but it's the idea to cherish your romantic notions, even if they're not all that realistic. Yeah, so you get the idea. Find the music that might be timely and validating, and let your emotions process through hearing the melody that supports the statements in the lyrics. In The Wizard of Oz, the movie, when Dorothy says goodbye to the Tin Man before her ruby slippers take her home to Kansas, he tearfully tells her, "Now I know I have a heart, because it's breaking." And that's life. Sometimes we have heartache. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us capable of love. We all tend to face it either through a breakup or something like widowhood, even in the longest relationships. History gives us all kinds of, barfy sweet cliches about this that have prompted prose and poetry for centuries. It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. And this can be kind of a cold comfort, but in that phrase, sometimes the emphasis needs to be just on the comfort, cold or not. So, if you would like support for your own breakup, or if you have a friend who does, consider therapy if you're in California, where I'm licensed, or life coaching for everywhere else worldwide. Sessions are available on Zoom Monday through Friday in the Los Angeles and Pacific time zone, and we just kind of do the math on what time zone where you're located. I have a client in Australia, and my early afternoon is his early morning, and we just make it work that way. More ways that you can access my content include my 2013 book, Self-Empowerment, Have the Life You Want. So Self-Empowerment, Have the Life You Want. That's available on Amazon or Lulu, LULU.com. And stay tuned for my upcoming e-course series, which can be a more affordable option if full sessions aren't possible, particularly sometimes with international exchange rates from the US dollar to where you are, on a variety of topics supporting gay men's mental health and well-being. I've got several in development, and I'm going to be launching those and talking your ear off about those to promote them when the time comes. And they're going to be a little more elaborate than when I do a blog article or like a podcast episode like this. So more news will be coming on about those currently being developed. You can always reach me two ways: Ken at gaytherapyla.com or Ken at gaycoachingla.com, or also by phone or on WhatsApp, and that's 310-339-5778. 310-339-5778, and I would be happy to help. So thanks, and I'll see you next time.